Welcome to the Hockey Writers Prospect Corner, a show with our top prospects writing crew, bringing you the latest news, analysis, scouting reports, mocks, rankings, and much more. From the World Juniors to the NHL Draft floor, from the farm to the NHL, our team covers everything that happens in the world of prospects. So sit back, grab a notebook, and get ready for Prospect Corner.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Prospect Corner presented by the Hockey Writers. Today, we're going to be taking a look at some of the most interesting picks and prospects that were traded at the 2023 NHL trade deadline, as well as looking forward to the 2023 NHL Draft, now that roughly half of NHL fan bases have given up on the season, knowing that their favorite teams are not going to make the playoffs, unless your team is in the Eastern wildcard race, which is chaos right now. All right, my name is Logan Horn. I'm your host, and today I'm going to be joined by my co-hosts Matthew Zator and Peter Baracchini. Peter, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Still reeling over that massive winter storm that we had, because we already had we still had snow from the last storm, and then we got piled with another 25. So there's about a good 30 centimeters of snow outside my place right now. It came up. I remember yesterday, went outside, it was like right at my chest, and that has not happened in quite some time. So
Nice.
Winter's still around. Hopefully this is the last bit of it, because I am sick and tired of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you have thunder snow there?
We did. That was the most insane thing I've ever seen in my life. And I was whatever days old I was today, years old, when I figured out that thunder snow was actually a thing. And I'm like, man, that was just absolutely crazy.
Yeah, I can imagine. I don't think I'd heard of that before this year either, but I've heard it a few times this winter, which is weird. I have never experienced that. It sounds very strange. Just dark and quiet, and then you get thunder and I don't know. That's weird.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm glad you're doing all right with all the snow. I thought we were almost done here in Calgary as well, but in the last 2 weeks we've had another 1.5 2 feet of snow, so who knows, maybe it'll never end.
Oh god, no, it has to.
Yeah, well, we now go to our West Coast co-host, who does not experience this nearly to the same extent, even though snow on the West Coast is bad because there's no budget for snow removal and it's chaos in a different way. But anyway, Matt, how are you doing? It's good to see you this week.
I'm doing good. Yeah, we had our last bit of snow last week, and it was a dumping about a couple days, but I'm hoping that's the end of it. But yeah, doing well. Canucks beat the Maple Leafs, so that's always good.
Oh boy. Not today.
That was a rough
play nice
15-20 seconds. I will say that on the power play.
Yeah. 2 shorthanded goals.
Yeah, that was tough.
Elias Pettersson. Yeah, I mean, as much as the Canucks have been not good this season, very exciting to watch Elias Pettersson play. So he's a superstar, even though Alvin said Canucks don't have one, but they do. They definitely do. But yeah, doing really well. And trade deadline over. We're into draft mode, so let's go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It is time for the draft. Not really. It's actually like 3.5 months away still. But we're full steam ahead. There's plenty of stuff to do between then and the finishing of a lot of junior seasons, playoffs, stuff like that to watch, and a couple tournaments. So we've got a lot of coverage to a lot of things to cover. So let's just get into it here. The trade deadline just passed on Friday, however many days ago that is by the time this is up, and 8 first-round picks in the 2023 draft were traded in the weeks and days leading up to the deadline, with 2 of them actually being traded twice in that time, which I feel like I haven't seen in a while. I'm just curious, I'll come to you first, Matt. Which traded draft pick in this year's draft do you think has the most value?
This was a tough one to kind of see, because I mean, in my mind, I think all of them are really valuable, and I didn't think this many would move. I mean, honestly, I know I was on record saying this, that I don't think 1 or 2 were going to go, and
a quarter of them. Yeah,
like that's insane to me. Yes, they're all late picks. They're all picks that are not the big rebuilding team top 15 picks, or I mean, there could be one, but but they're all in the later rounds, later of the first. But I mean, it's still, to me, it was a surprising. But I'm gonna say the Canucks one, that's moved now twice. So it's like the one that they traded to the New York Islanders, or got from the New York Islanders,
right,
and then traded to the Detroit Red Wings. I think that pick could end up being really valuable because as much as the Islanders may make the playoffs and not get that top 12 because they would have the pick, regardless, I think that one's going to end up being pretty good because you're going to end up probably being in the 15 to 20 range where you can pick I don't think Reinbacher anymore. I think he's kind of moved up, but like an Axel Sandin-Pellikka maybe, in that range. So I'm going to say that pick, and that was one that moved twice. So yeah.
Yeah, that one's just being passed around. Yeah, that one, it was kind of wild to see it get traded again just a couple weeks after they landed it. Anywho, Peter, what do you think? Which traded 2023 draft pick do you think has the most value this year?
I would argue that I think the Canucks could have benefited from that because it's still a top 15 pick regardless, even though it's top 12 protected, and it's going to Detroit right now, who has already a plethora of prospects within their system right now. So having still 2 top 15 picks is good for them. But I am going to go to a pick that wasn't traded at, I mean, I'm kind of cheating a little bit because I'm not using this one, but the pick traded from the Florida Panthers last year to the Montreal Canadiens is really looking valuable for the Montreal Canadiens right now. We didn't expect the Florida Panthers to be this bad and struggling with everything like that, but with the move that they made to bring in Matthew Tkachuk, you lost the top winger in Huberdeau, you lost the top 2 defender in Mackenzie Weegar, you're not getting good goaltending, and that pick right now is just outside of the top 10, and it could possibly go even lower too, depending if the Florida Panthers continue to slide. And you know, with that pick that's in between 11 to 50, anywhere between 10 11 right now, another top or 2 top 15 picks for the Montreal Canadiens is looking very, very promising right now. So that's just going to help jumpstart them a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't remember the exact number, but I crunched the numbers last week at one point, and there is about a 1 in 200, 1 in 250 chance that the Habs get 2 top 3 picks, because that Panthers pick is the only one currently in like the lottery area, the 1 to 16, that is not protected in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Matt, you mentioned like you didn't expect there to be many traded, and most of them that are in the later stages of the round, likely based on where the team's expectations for themselves are in the playoffs. But all the ones that are kind of borderline, New York Islanders pick, and the Ottawa Senators pick that they traded to Arizona for as a part of the package for Jacob Chikrin. Those are both protected top 12, top 10, I think, in that order. But Florida did not have that foresight. Obviously, no one expected them to be this bad, but they have been. So that could be an interesting one for sure. Okay, next up here, I want to know your guys' thoughts on which team that was selling at this year's deadline, because we typically think of it as sellers and buyers. A lot of teams kind of land in the middle somewhere, making little tiny moves that don't make a difference. I'm looking at you, Calgary. But Peter, I'll start with you this time. Which selling team do you think did the most to set themselves up for the future? Teams like San Jose, Detroit, Columbus, anyone? Chicago?
Yeah, I mean, I could say Chicago because of that Jake McCabe trade for the 2024 pick. They've definitely added quite a lot of picks, but yeah, I'm actually looking at what the Nashville Predators did. Obviously, they had a different direction going in. They didn't sell a whole lot, but they did sell a key piece in Matthias Ekholm, and they got that first rounder from the Edmonton Oilers right now. And again, we talk about like how how decent their prospect system is because of Yaroslav Askarov, Luke Evangelista. If they add another top 20 pick, which they have right now based on standings, points percentage, what have you, they have 2 decent picks right now in the span from like 16 to 20 right now. And obviously the standings can change at any point, but to have those kind of picks right now in this year's draft is very promising. And I'll even say the Chicago Blackhawks as well, because of the fact that they do get additional pieces for the future. Didn't quite get a whole lot for Patrick Kane, but then again, their hands were tied. But yeah, I think those ones right there are probably two main ones that I'm looking at as probably setting themselves up good for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. They did plenty. I was encouraged to see Nashville finally take a step back on purpose.
Yeah.
To hopefully set themselves up a little better. Matt, what do you think? Which selling team at this year's deadline did the most to set themselves up?
Yeah, I was going to say the Predators. I mean, that Jeannot trade was insane to me. I mean, to get that much for a guy that's, I mean, Jeannot's a great player. I mean, I loved him last year, and he's a very good bottom six player. But I don't feel he's worth that much. Although
I would have settled for a second and a third.
Yeah, I mean, come on, like you basically gave away almost all their draft capital for the next few years. But I mean, Tampa Bay, they have a plan. They want to win a cup again. And they think Jeannot's going to be a big part of it, so can't really fault them for doing it. And if it comes out results, I mean, may as well do it. But since Peter took that, I'll say Detroit, because they were unexpectedly busy getting picks, and I didn't expect a first round pick for Hronek. If they were going to trade him, I thought maybe a second round pick. But the way he's been playing, I mean, he's worth a first, but I've said this many times. He shouldn't be getting a first and a second in this draft. And the Canucks just overpaid for a guy that's, I mean, admittedly very good defenseman, but for that much to give up is not. But the Detroit Red Wings came away pretty good, getting that first and a second, which is going to be a high second round pick, because the Canucks are going to finish in the bottom 10. It's going to be right at the beginning of the second round. We know how deep this draft is going into the second round. You're going to get a first round caliber player there. So Detroit gets that. And then they also do a few other trades, trading Sundqvist, getting another pick there. And then trading Verana. Yes, it was only a 7th round pick, not in this coming draft, but still, I mean, you're getting a pick that could potentially be very good. And the Red Wings have notoriously been good at drafting for late round picks. So you never know what that could become. So yeah, I'm going to say Detroit, and then Nashville, obviously, because they did quite a bit for a team that wasn't expected to be selling. Right. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the other trade there was Tyler Bertuzzi.
Yeah.
To the Bruins.
Yeah.
Detroit added a couple firsts, a second, a couple fourths, a 7th, I think. Quite a bit. It kind of felt like with the arms race everyone's been talking about in the Eastern Conference, with Timo Meier, Patrick Kane, Tarasenko, Ryan O'Reilly. It never seemed to slow down. And Detroit was getting close. They were in the playoff race. And even for a couple days there, they were in a playoff spot by points percentage. But it seemed like they knew that if the best case scenario is sneaking into the playoffs and losing in 5 to Boston, and I mean it, best case scenario.
Yeah.
It's probably better to just commit to the core that you want, the young guys that are still coming into the league, and trade some of the other guys in their prime for a little bit of an overpay in both cases, maybe. But yeah, we'll take it. All right. So next question here. This one is for you, Matt. So one of the best prospects traded this year near the deadline, kind of early, was Aatu, who was part of the Bo Horvat trade from the New York Islanders to Vancouver. What are your thoughts on him and his future, down the depth chart or just talent-wise in Vancouver?
Well, I loved getting him back in the trade. He's looked very good since being drafted way down in the second round. He should have been drafted in the top 5 at some point. I mean, maybe not then, but there was that projection that he could have been in that top 5, even the first overall pick. I believe he was the guy at one point in that conversation. So a lot of skill, a lot of talent. He's a big guy. He's a centerman. But I mean, he's been underwhelming since he's come to the Canucks. He hasn't been very good in the AHL. He's played in the NHL I haven't noticed him when he's played. But again, he hasn't gotten many minutes. And now that the Canucks have acquired Kravtsov, Rato's not even in the lineup. So, he hasn't been impressive since he's come to the Canucks. So already got fans kind of freaking out that he's not going to pan out. But I mean, this is very early. This guy is very young. He's gonna play in the AHL probably next season as well, unless he blows everyone out of the water and makes the team. But it seems like the Canucks are committed to playing guys in the minors. Now they got Höglander down there. Podkolzin played quite a bit before he came back up here. So I'm going to say Ratu's going to develop in the AHL. I'm really excited for his potential, though, with the Canucks, because he does have a lot of potential to become a Horvat type player, because he's got the size, he's got the skill, he's working on his skating. So I'm really excited to what he can bring to the Canucks in the future, even though he hasn't really done much yet. I mean, again, this has only been a month or so, right? I mean, January 31st, I think the trade was made, and it's been about a month and a bit. So, I mean, that you can't really judge on a sample size of how small it is in the AHL and how really small in the NHL so far. So I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I'm hoping that he can just become, because I think he still has a lot of potential in the NHL.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's got a ton of skill. I think it makes a lot of sense to give him the end of the season in the AHL, let him play the playoffs there. I believe the Abbotsford Canucks have been on a bit of a run the last month or so, so they should really could be competitive there. But also it feels like his future is pretty wide open in Vancouver, because past Elias Pettersson and JT Miller, who are the centers? Sheldon Dries, Niels Oman. Like, next year it'll be tough to keep those guys out of the lineup, or in the lineup with Raty sitting out, but you never know. It might take him a little bit longer, but he's still coming along. He's still young, and he's shown a ton of growth the last year and a half. So there's no reason to think that stops just because he goes to the West Coast. Peter, I've got a question here for you. So this is about some young players and prospects, and another big trade, probably at least the most hyped trade of the deadline, the Timo Meier trade that sent him from the San Jose Sharks to the New Jersey Devils. So the Devils traded Fabian Zetterlund and Shakir Mukhamadullin, among plenty of other pieces. That was a massive trade with a bunch of just roster spot players and prospects and picks here and there, and it was just very complicated. But what do you think about those two players, Zetterlund and Mukhamadullin, and what kind of impact do you think they'll have on a rebuilding Sharks team?
Yeah, I mean, everyone was thinking that if there was going to be a deal for Timo Meier, you were thinking that Alexander Holtz, Dawson Mercer were going to be names possibly in the mix going back. And yet here we are talking about, two prospects, or one that's pushing on the age of closing in on the 25 mark. He's 23, and Fabian Zetterlund, where time is not necessarily on his side, but it's slowly starting to seem like that. And a young prospect or puck moving, shooting defenseman in Mukhamadullin, where, he's got the offensive upside and potential, but his defensive game is still a little bit raw, still making some mistakes. But obviously, once he comes over here, he's going to learn the system, learn what they expect from them. And hopefully he can sort of round out that game and be a little bit more consistent with his play away from the puck and within his own zone. But yeah, you expect him to have a massive impact because of the fact that, they're in a rebuilding stage right now, and they're being sent in exchange for Meier, who, is probably throwing himself into, I would consider him as a top 10 winger in this league right now, because of the fact that, how well he's scoring goals, using his size to his advantage and being effective in the corners in front of the net. But yeah, I think with Zetterlund, mainly, again, he's getting up there in age where he's been seeing a lot of time in the AHL. Maybe he has that chance to try and crack the roster and be that kind of energy player where he's going in and setting up an attack and, just being a pest to kind of play or go up against because of his energy and speed. And with Mukhamadullin, I think that, he just needs to stay the course and stick with what's working with him at this point. Again, I talk about him trying to improve on his defensive game. Obviously he has a chance to be a potential top 4 defenseman for this team. Obviously he has a ceiling, but we'll see where it plays out. There's a lot of time, especially for him, lots of time to develop, especially when he comes over, maybe needs to spend a couple seasons in the AHL, develop a little bit more. But I think that that's the expectation for what the Sharks are getting for both players.
Yeah, absolutely. Great analysis there. It felt a little underwhelming to see those as some of the main player names. There's some picks in there that will become players for sure. Little underwhelming, like you said. Some people were like thinking there'd be some major prospects there because New Jersey has plenty of them, but they did a great job protecting those assets, those players. But these players are better than people know. I think Shakir Mukhamadullin, just the name and the fact that he's been in Russia ever since he was drafted. People don't know a lot about him. It's pretty polarizing. I still see a top 4 defenseman in there eventually. And Zetterlund has been like quite good this year on a good Devils team as one of the younger guys that's just been, he was fighting for a spot to start the year, but he's been quite good, and who knows, could be in the top 6 for San Jose very soon. If he's not already, I actually don't know how they've been deploying him since he's traded, but there's still some good value there. A little bit of a quantity over quality type situation, but Mike Greer and the Sharks just had to do the best they could with the offers they were given. All right, so I've got another question here. We also saw a bunch of future first-round picks traded at this year's deadline. That Tyler Bertuzzi trade we mentioned, Boston traded their first-rounder in 2024, top 10 protected. Some of these are protected as well. Maple Leafs sent Chicago their 2025, I believe, first-rounder, which is also top 10 protected. There's a few others like Tampa Bay trading a first for Tanner Jeannot. Well, first, second, third, fourth, fifth in a bunch of random years for Tanner Jeannot. So Matt, I'll come to you first here. Which future first round pick that was traded at the deadline do you think has the most potential value?
I mean, like I say, they're all going to be later round picks, I would assume. I mean, I don't think the Maple Leafs are going to fall off a cliff, in 2025. Only you never know. Boston, I don't think is going to fall off a cliff either. But I'm going to say that Tampa, even the Tampa Bay Lightning, they're all,
it's tough.
It's tough to pick one because which one will rebound or which one could fall off.
You could say Toronto. That's fine.
Yeah. I'm really leaning to Toronto.
Matthews to Arizona.
Yeah. I'm going to say I'm going to say the Maple Leafs one. No. I'm going to say Boston. I'm going to say Boston because I think Boston's got, because the fact that Bergeron's going to retire, Krejci will retire, probably those two guys aren't going to be on the team next season. So they may take a step back and have that. It's the 2024 when they traded, didn't they?
That's right. Yeah. So next season, end of next season.
I'll stick with Toronto then. Because this one will be a low pick. So I'll stick with Toronto because I think that 2025 could potentially be a good one, even though it is top 10 protected. So if they do finish and fall way off, they could. But I think if they don't make, and this is a lot of ifs in this. So if they don't go far in the playoffs, I think Dubas is gone. And there's going to be a lot of changes on the roster, even though they've already traded a few. I think there's some bigger players on the move because they're going to try to really shake up the roster because why aren't they making it in the playoffs after so much, right? So I'm going to say that one because I don't think the Boston one will be a low pick this year. But that could also potentially be a good one because the fact that this draft is so good. So, I really have picked two teams, so I'll pick those two.
Okay. All of them. Okay. Yeah. Peter, what do you think? Which future first round pick that was traded do you think has the most potential value?
Again, like Matt said, all these are possibly going to be late round picks anyways. But for me, the most one that's going to have a lot of implications, I think is going to be the Tampa Bay one, considering the fact that they don't have a first round pick in the next 3 years. 2023, don't even pick till round 6. Their prospect pool is kind of bare as it is right now. So I think that pick alone, maybe they could have held on to that first, but at the same time, it's a massive gamble on their part to try and make that move, especially giving up 5-6 picks for Jeannot, who's only going to see third line minutes. And then all of a sudden you're left with, with not to say with just these players, but Isaac Howard's really good. Jack Thompson's really good as well. But aside from those two players in your system, you have no farm system to try and rely on and develop. But then again, we've seen how well they've drafted and developed in the past. But compared to other teams right now, they are very weak and they could use the picks. But for the Nashville Predators, that pick is going to work wonders for them. And it may come back and haunt the Tampa Bay Lightning, where maybe they shouldn't have gone, spending picks just for fun as like they were just giving away candy kind of thing. So that's my take for that one.
Sure. I mean, that Jeannot situation, that is a great example of what a bidding war will do for you.
Yeah.
So my thought on this is that if you are someone either who seriously thinks this or does it as a joke to anger your friends who are fans of the Maple Leafs, if you're someone who thinks that Austin Matthews might legitimately leave as a free agent, then the first rounder that they traded is in the year following that, his free agency year. So that Toronto pick could have some value that way. Or if you just think they're going to forever be stuck in the first round and it'll be at the latest 24th overall. Not bad. I'm going to go with, though, that Boston pick in 2024, even though it's just a year away. Boston was already on pace to be like a record-breaking, or at least very close to that team before the deadline. And they have made a ton of big moves. And that, could be just circumstantial, but that kind of hints to me that they're going all in. Like they potentially have heard from one or both of Bergeron and Krejci that they're probably not going to come back. And they're like, okay, this is the last one. We're going to go all out and make it happen for sure. That could be wrong. And this Boston team isn't going to be bad after losing just those two players. They'll probably lose Bertuzzi as well. Who knows about Orlov? Lots of unrestricted free agents, pending unrestricted free agents that they've added. They're still going to be good. But I feel like there is a chance that, if you lose Bergeron, that is a big hit. He's not a normal 38-year-old or however old he is. He is something special. He's still kicking it, and he could be a very successful center for a couple more years at least. But that's my pick. I think it's got a lot of potential next year.
Counterpoint to that, I said the exact same thing about their defense and goaltending, and look what's happening this season.
So fair.
Who knows?
I say that you can go back to videos on the season preview show for the Boston Bruins. I said that they weren't going to be good because they had so much of their defense gone.
Sure.
Well, I was totally wrong.
I mean, the culture and the coaches and tons of players still there. Who knows? They could still be cup contenders next year. But don't forget, I believe they were out in the first round last year to Carolina. So anything could happen. Even if
President's Trophy curse too.
Yeah, President's Trophy curse. Okay, we're gonna do a couple quick fire questions here, just to end out the first half of the show. And so you guys have not seen these, and I'm just gonna force you to give me your first reaction, your first thoughts. So Peter, I'll start with you. The Washington Capitals pulled off like a legit retool, not like a fake retool that all these teams talk about at the trade deadline, trading away a bunch of their pending UFAs. They had 11 going in, and they traded a good handful of them for tons of picks, some of which they cashed in right away. They landed Rasmus Sandin from Toronto. Pretty successful deadline in my eyes, for a team that wasn't going to succeed this year, but isn't planning on tearing it down. Which team, aside from them, obviously, do you think would have been best served by having this same approach at the deadline that didn't do it? Which team do you think could have been sellers that was a little too high on themselves and decided not to be?
I'm going to say the Calgary Flames, in the sense that, they're kind of falling out of the playoff spot. They've gone on a pretty bad record. Obviously they still have belief that they're a really good team, and that's why they didn't make any moves. But at the same time, you notice that you were lacking some of the impact that you had when, you lost Johnny Gaudreau, you lost Matthew Tkachuk. You're not getting that same kind of return that you are with Jonathan Huberdeau right now. So I think maybe they could have done a quick retool, because they do have some pieces in place. They have some prospects coming up, and namely Jacob Peltier getting some ice time, hopefully right now. And he's not getting called out by the coach for less than 10 minutes a game. But I do think that, they're out of it right now. They continue to fall out of the playoffs. So why not try to go into that little mode where you're still middle of the pack, kind of retinker and everything and retool, because you still have a top goaltender and Jacob Markstrom. Defense is still pretty good and allowing minimal shots against. It's just you got to get that save in, and he needs to get back on track with that. So if you add a couple more forwards or try and bring them in or retool, your bottom six or middle six, I think that would have served them well.
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of feels like Washington with all those extra picks. I would be surprised if they use all those picks. They'll probably cash those in this offseason before the draft or maybe on draft day. And yeah, that's a good one there. Calgary probably could have used that same kind of situation. Matt, what do you think? Is there a team that would have been better served at the deadline by copying Washington compared to what they did end up doing?
Yeah, Calgary is a good pick. They're probably the most, if you want to put into that. The Canucks, they could have done a bit more, but they believe they should be retooling when they should be rebuilding. But so, they're in a different position, I think. They should be rebuilding rather than retooling. But they apparently had an offer for Miller, even though Alvin has denied it, a rebuild type move. Where Pittsburgh was offering just picks, and they're like, no, we're not rebuilding, so we don't want to give up. We don't just want to get picks in return. Well, maybe that's a good idea. But yeah, it's not really answering your question because they should be rebuilding, not retooling. So I'll match Peter and just say Calgary, because I don't really see there's another team that could have done the same type of thing. I was actually thinking Washington was going to sell, but they've actually retooled because, bringing in Sandin, who's a legitimate NHL defenseman, and he's young, he can be part of that core. Well, you're trading away Orlov. That seems like a sell move, but he wasn't going to re-sign with them anyway. So, it was a great move to do because Sandin's going to be part of that top four for the foreseeable future now. And he's going to be a really good defenseman. I think he could actually end up being a top pairing defenseman. Carlson's still relatively young, or I guess he's more in his prime right now. So, Sandin could actually potentially take over for him. So I'll just match and say the Flames and just praise Washington for what they did.
Yeah, it felt like a pretty smart move there. Sandin's been crushing third line minutes for a year or two now. Give him a bigger role, which Toronto wasn't interested in doing, I guess. So, for them, they're giving up someone that they picture as a third pairing guy. But Washington, in their first game with Sandin, played him on the top pairing with Carlson injured right now. And I think he had 3 points, 3 assists in his first game with the Capitals. So something to watch there. One more question here, quick fire. There are a ton of teams now that have multiple first round picks in this year's draft. You can either quickly pull up Tankathon, or I can try to list as many as I can. Which team do you think has the most overall value in the first round? Columbus has the best odds at number 1 and 24. Chicago has 2 and 26. Arizona 4-14. St. Louis 9, 27, 29. Obviously, volume of picks is important, but the top end of this draft is serious. So those picks are really good. Matt, what do you think? Which team do you think has the most value in the first round this year?
Well, I want to say that, Columbus, obviously, because they're going to have a real good shot at Connor Bedard. So I won't go with them. I'll say the St. Louis Blues, because they've gotten, apart from the draft picks, they actually did get some other guys at the trade deadline that could potentially be part of a retool rather than a rebuild. So, adding those 3 first round picks, they got 3 right at the end. Yeah. They're going to be really good. I think getting those 3, even though they are later round picks, those are all going to be NHL players. I would think they would be, because of how good this draft is. So I'm going to say the Blues are going to end up having the most value out of this.
Sure. Yeah. Peter, what do you think? Which team with multiple first rounders this year has the most overall value?
Yeah, Columbus would be an easy pick, but I'm gonna go with a team that I mentioned before, Montreal Canadiens. Already 1 pick in the top 10, 1 just outside. So you already have a developing prospect system as is. To get like a pick in like the 8th or even like 10th, 11th, 12th spot, that's really great value for a team that's still up on the rise, developing very well, and you just add 2 top names to your system right then and there.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to keep the trend of picking different teams. I'm going to go with Arizona. I believe they have the odds at 4-14 right now with the Senators pick. The Sens have been on a run. Obviously, they added Chikrin, so they're going to get better. But I don't quite think they're going to make the playoffs, which would give them another top 16-ish pick. And then Arizona's pick at 4, like getting one of those top 4 prospects for this draft is huge. So that pick could be huge for their future. All right. So now I'm just going to let you all know that today's episode is brought to you by our sponsor, Hockeypedia. Have you ever been looking for details on a player that just competed in the World Juniors? Do you want to know who owns the New York Islanders? How many prospects selected in the first round that the Vegas Golden Knights have traded away? Hint, it's almost all of them. Have you ever wondered what the NHL awards are and who they're named after, their history, whoever's won them? If you're interested in these or any other hockey-related questions, make sure you check out and bookmark the Hockey Writers Hockeypedia. It's an ever-growing collection of hockey resources that is invaluable to any fan looking for information. Check for the link in the show description below and dive in today. All right, so the last half of the show here, we're going to talk about the 2023 draft, as we will be for another 3.5, 4 months, maybe longer, because we'll talk about it after as well. And I am more than happy with that. So just going to do some kind of general stuff here, just looking at some of the movers in the draft. So let's see, Peter, I'm going to come to you first. Who is a prospect in this draft that you think has risen the most in your mind from the start of the season until now? Someone you maybe even didn't know existed, and now they're someone you're a big fan of. You can know they existed before. It's okay. That's not a requirement. But.
Yeah. 2, I want to give it a little honorable mention to Nick Lardis. I really thought he's jumped out the page ever since, the trade over to the Hamilton Bulldogs. Ever since he was also playing at the top prospects game, I thought he looked tremendous in that regard. Playing with intensity, purpose, being aggressive, and just being kind of like a little pest to just go up against, because he's got that overall skill set and offensive mindset right now. So shout out to him. But I'm going to pick Oliver Bonk from the London Knights. I was watching a game and I was really happy with his play. Not saying this because I want the Maple Leafs to draft him, but because they got that first round pick, they traded away. I'm like, okay, well, there goes the whole Oliver Bonk thing. Then they got the first round back, so the dream is still alive kind of thing. But even if he wasn't a target for the Maple Leafs, whoever gets him is getting a very smart, composed, two-way defenseman, and he looks pretty good in the shootout too. He's got some really nice hands there, but just his overall demeanor, his awareness, his positioning, doesn't panic in any sort of situation. I really like what he's done so far from the beginning of the season till now. And he's a first round pick in my view. So whoever gets him, you're getting a really solid defenseman and also a right-handed shot. Teams value right-handed shot defensemen, no matter if they're offensive defensemen, two-way. I project him as a top 4 D-man, so he's going to get a lot of possibly second pairing minutes at that point. So, yeah, Oliver Bonk is going to be my pick.
Yeah, that's a great one. He's quickly turned into one of your guys for this year, hey?
He is, yeah.
It's kind of fun, though, that like at the start of the year, we thought maybe 2 or 3 defensemen in the first round, looking at Cam Allen, maybe at Gulyayev, but then who knew who else? But now there's been a good handful jumping in. Tanner Molendijk, some people like Luca Cagnoni quite a bit, think he's coming to the first round. Not quite there yet, but maybe. Lots more defensemen, at least in the later half of the first round. Yeah. But there's a lot more than we thought at first. Matt, who's a prospect in this year's draft that has risen a lot for you from the start of the season until now?
Well, this is a guy I believe you mentioned earlier, I don't know how long ago, but Aiden Fink from
big fan.
Yeah, and I know you probably was a prospect of the week, I believe you picked.
Yeah, I actually just interviewed him this week for an article.
Well, there you go. So I'll mention him because he's been amazing. And ever since you mentioned him, I've been following him, and how was, again, undersized guy, 5'9", but man, that skill level and goal scoring ability he's got what, 41 goals so far with the Brooks Bandits right now. And having 97 points. I mean, the AJHL isn't the high end league that, playing in the the dub or anything like that, but I don't care where you are. 41 goals is really good in my opinion to score that many. And he's improved over the last bit. He just won the AJHL MVP and top forward award and top just a couple days ago too, and very deserving. I believe they only have one more game left, according to Elite Prospects, that's right, at 55 games. Is that right? So I mean, he's just got so much goal scoring ability, and not ranked by any major outlets. He is obviously ranked by NHL Central Scouting, 66, but I'm not saying he's going to be drafted in the first round or anything like that, but he's raising up to actually potentially be drafted in the second or the third. But I mean, being in the same conversation, MVP award, Cale Makar won this in 2016-17. So being in your conversation, and article I read, he was working with a skating coach that worked with Makar. So I mean, that's a pretty good guy to mirror. Makar's probably one of the best skating defensemen in the NHL. So but his main ability is goal scoring and his shot. So I'm really going to be following Fink for the rest of the time, because you know how much, if you've watched the show before, you know how much I love the undersized guys succeeding. So I'm going to go with Fink on this question.
Nice. Yeah, I'll always be on your side if you bring up Fink like that. So keep it up. Someone who's risen a ton for me. It almost feels impossible because it feels like he's always kind of been a first rounder, but someone that I'd never heard of until the World Juniors in August is David Reinbacher. Hadn't heard of him. Heard of him at that tournament. Wasn't too surprised or impressed by anything, but I was like, okay, he's a player that'll be drafted, no doubt. And then he's been excellent in Switzerland this year. Personally, he's in my top 10 at this point. Obviously didn't have the most exciting World Juniors in December, January, though he was playing sick, and he was really one of the only players that could do anything on that Austria team that struggled a lot. Just a big two-way defenseman. He's been great as a top 4 guy in the top Swiss league this year. So I like him a lot. He's gone from someone I didn't know about a calendar year ago to someone that's in my top 10. So that would be mine. On the other end, there's one easy answer, and I'll let anyone take it that wants to. Matt, what's a prospect, or who is a prospect in this upcoming NHL draft that has fallen the most in your mind from the start of the season until now?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few. I mean, we mentioned him at the beginning. Edward Shala, I think, mentioned not this show, but before we recorded. I think he's dropped a bit because I thought I would notice him a bit more at the World Juniors, and I didn't. Sure. He was okay, but I mean, for a guy that's supposed to be in the top 10, 15 in this draft, I thought you'd notice him a bit more. So I'll go with Shala here. I mean, like I say, he's still, I think, in my mind, a top 15, 20 pick. But for a guy that was ranked in the 10, I don't think he's going to be in the top 10. I think he's going to fall towards closer to the 20, maybe. Because, I mean, overall, I don't think from what I've seen of him, he hasn't really impressed me for a guy that's supposed to be drafted that high.
Sure, yeah, that's a good one. It's been a little lackluster in his pro league play this year. He is young, but hasn't been the most exciting prospect there. Peter, who would you say is a prospect in the upcoming draft that has fallen a lot in your mind from the start of the season until now?
Yeah, it's going to be Kasper Halttunen from HIFK. And this was from the Helenka Gretzky tournament. This is a player that I was really excited to watch because he has that blend of speed, the powerful shot, and the physicality, because he just takes no prisoners, whether he's in the corners or making an open ice hit. This guy is going to lay the body. And I was really excited to see how he was going to progress during the season. In the U20 league, he had 18 literally a goal per game, 18 and 18 and 24 points. But when he's at the league at the senior level, just 1 assist in 27 games. I believe he was also dealing with injuries. Not sure exactly what the extent was. I'd have to go back and check, but I know that he did deal with something. So maybe it's just him trying to find his footing, try and get used to the senior level. But with his size, I think maybe probably could have worked to his advantage, especially given his speed for a player of his size and the powerful shot that he had. I thought I would have expected a little bit more, but just isn't quite having the draft year consistency that you would see all around from other players that are starting to move up right now. So that's going to be my pick. I still like the blend that he has. If he's able to try and bring that up or like show a little bit more consistency, he may rise up again, but he's fallen down from, continue to fall down from like top 10, top 20, top 32, and now he's in my second round right now. So yeah, unfortunately it happens for some players, but I still like what he brings to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another good pick there. Wow, I lobbed a real softball with this question, and neither of you took the chance to talk about Cam Allen, but I think that's just because we've already talked about enough just how I wouldn't say disappointing, but how underwhelming the season has been for him. He looked the part of the first defenseman to go, but he might be a second rounder this year. He has the pedigree, and he hasn't been bad this year necessarily. But yeah, he's definitely fallen quite a bit. Just like you were saying, Peter, like the Hlinka Gretzky tournament is where I saw him in the summer, and I mean, he looked like a top defensive prospect. But the player that I'm actually going to go with that's dropped not as far for me, but someone that at that same tournament I was very impressed with, and then I haven't seen quite that level from him again, is Caden Price, another defenseman there that was playing for Team Canada. Everyone was talking about Cam Allen, and watching those games, I was like, who is this Price kid who's just making like wicked cross ice passes and stretch passes, stuff like that. I was really impressed with his playmaking and starting the rush and stuff. And I haven't loved what I've seen from him this year. I was kind of hoping he'd be a maybe top 20 guy, but not in my first round at this point either. Okay, so I've got one more question before we switch it up a little bit here. And Peter, I'll come to you first. Is there a prospect this year who you're convinced should be a first round pick on talent, but you're also very confident that they're not going to go in the first round because one reason or another, they're too short or they're too light or something like that?
Ooh, that is a really good question. Considering he's on that edge of the first or second, I am still convinced that Tyler Molendyk should be in the first round. Obviously the consensus, like, he is a little bit undersized. I believe he's 5'10", with his size, but at the same time, the smarts and skill set that he possesses is just on another level right now. Similar to Oliver Bonk, I'm a big fan of defenders that possesses that strong two-way game. And we talked about the prospects game, how he was impactful in every single shift that he did to start the game. And he was a standout player for me. I think that he continues to cement himself as a top name, as a top 32 prospect in this year's draft because of his smarts alone. And obviously, with defensemen, especially undersized defensemen, you want them to take their time, but he has the potential to be an impactful kind of guy because of his puck moving abilities, his ability to jump into rush. He's a whole package, and even in his own end, he's very calm. So I'm very convinced that Tyler Molendyk should be worth a first round pick this year.
Yeah, that's a great one. Matt, is there anyone in this year's draft that you're convinced should be a first rounder on talent, but you're also pretty confident we'll drop it to at least the second round?
Well, an easy answer is Andrew Crystal, but we've mentioned his name quite a bit. Although I think he's risen up a lot more now. I think he could be probably a first round pick, later first round. But we said that about Stankoven, so I never know. I'm going to throw out two names. Mazden Leslie is one. The Vancouver Giants. He's just had a heck of a season. He's got 43 points. in 59 games right now, and had a hat trick just a few days ago. And defensemen hat tricks don't normally happen. So I'm going to go with Leslie for one, and then I'm going to still stay on my my William Whitelaw. I'm just going to go on the same with Coronado and just keep going. I'm just going to keep being in his corner because I think Whitelaw could be a first round pick, but I don't think he will be. He's just so much talent to be a first rounder, but I think he's going to drop to at least the second round. Some places Scott Wheeler has him at right at the end of the second at 64th. So, I mean, I'll shout out Wheeler as well because he does have Aiden Fink on his radar as second round pick for him. So, but yeah, I'll go with Leslie and Whitelaw as my two that I think have talent for first round, but probably, I mean, Leslie could even drop to the third. So
yeah, those are good ones as well. My go-to for this, he's gotten a little more, he's in the conversation a little bit, kind of on the borderline of first, second. Bradley Nadeau in the BCHL, playing for the Penticton Vs, at least last time I checked, leading the entire league in points by a decent margin as a first-year draft eligible. Just the speed, the shot, like his one-timer and his wrist shot, just dominating the BCHL. And I feel like he's a first-rounder in my eyes. I know the BCHL especially is kind of weirds people out the last few years. Junior A in general does, but the BCHL, like during COVID, left the like Canadian Junior A organization, so they're kind of on their own, and it's just kind of a weird situation. And Junior A players don't usually get the respect they deserve. But I think he's a first rounder. It might be borderline. He could go there to a team that's willing to take a little bit of a flyer on someone in a lower league, but I like him a lot. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're switching up some stuff here a little bit. Instead of a quick fire question to end the second half, I want to try out something a little different for now. I don't know what to call it. I'll call it a discussion question, where I'm just curious you guys' thoughts, a little less answer based, a little more just like conversation. So this is something I've just been thinking about a lot lately, and I'd love to get your guys' opinions, see where you stand on this, see where you think I'm wrong or correct, anything like that. So the main question is, do you think the 2023 NHL draft is a little overhyped or overrated? I still think it's an excellent class, and classes are defined by the top prospects, top players that come out of it. And the high end of this class, the top 4 picks, is better than any I can think of, really, with 3 or 4 guys that would be competing for first overall in each of the last 7 drafts. And then that kind of pushes guys that are maybe top 5 caliber, usually down to the top 10, pushes top 10 guys, top 15, and it all kind of just pushes all the talent back to make it a little deeper than usual. I've kind of got this feeling that people are getting themselves too excited for it, and they're building themselves up for a little bit of disappointment. Like if you get the 25th overall pick, you're not getting a top 10 caliber guy. It's not that. I'm not saying it's bad. I think it's going to be an above average draft, no doubt, especially because of that top 5. Yeah, I mean, the top end is special, but I don't know that it's going to be that much deeper past like the top 40 picks, top 50 picks. I feel like in that range, it's going to be very normal, pedestrian from then on. I'm curious your guys' thoughts. Matt, what do you think? Do you think I'm way off base? Do you think this is the greatest draft in the history of sports? Where do you land on this? What do you think?
In general, drafts are just it's a crapshoot. I mean, you're really, you'd hope, like, looking at drafts like Yakupov, first overall, everyone thought he was going to be a 50-plus goal scorer. I mean, you go back to his scouting reports, he was supposed to be that. What did he do? Nothing. So, I mean, I'm not saying Connor Bedard will be that type, but, it is interesting for drafts because you don't know. I mean, you're hoping that they will end up being what they are projected to be. But there's a lot of guys, like we did that redraft of the 2015 that we did.
Right. So
many guys in that top end never panned out. So, I mean, it could end up being that way, but I somewhat agree. So I'll say that this draft is probably the deepest in recent memory, not like craziness that you're going to be like, oh, we had like 50 first round, 50 elite players from this draft. There are some that do get that, right? But, this one could end up being that way, but I think it does end at a point, like you said. I think there is a point where you're going to be like, okay, now the rest is like, it's deeper than most. I'd say last draft, it kind of ended at around the 20 mark, where you're like, for sure, these guys are going to be really good. Later on, not so much. So I'm going to say this one is deep, but I think you could be underwhelmed by the amount of elite players that come from it.
Yeah. What do you think, Peter? Do you think it's right to say it's a little overhyped? Do you think the amount of excitement people have about it is right? What do you think?
First round talent wise, I think it does kind of match up because players do get bumped up, but you're still getting top 6 players towards the end of the first round, even beginning of the second, with all that potential. So first round, I agree. But at the same time, I do agree with Matt that, afterwards it's kind of like a crapshoot kind of thing, or you don't know what to expect from prospects, because there are going to be some names that you don't expect that are having a good draft year, and then they pop off after that and become a solid player right after that. So it's really difficult to try and figure out. I will say that this is the best draft since 2015. Is it better than 2015 is the main question. Highly doubt that, because we're already seeing McDavid pop off with the goal scoring that he's doing right now. Mitch Marner is an elite level playmaker. You're seeing Timo Meier, as we talked about earlier in the show, Mikko Rantanen, Zach Werenski, although he's been injured quite a bit, but he's still very solid offensive defenseman. You have all these players. And even so, like a name like Travis Konechny, who still, worked his way as a second liner, but is now getting first line minutes given where the Philadelphia Flyers are, and he's still succeeding. So players have that mindset where, they may thrive in the role and they can get to that point later on in their career. I think we'll see that with quite a bit of players, not just in the second round, but even in the third round, because there are a lot of players that have that potential that could possibly surprise. And, throw everybody a curveball saying that, hey, you know what? Yeah, we were low on this guy, but look at him for this team. He's doing pretty well. I mean, that's usually the case for any draft, but I think there are a lot of players where you look at even in the third round to say, hey, this guy could be a second. You look at a guy in a fourth, he could probably be a third kind of thing. But totally up in the air kind of thing. We really don't know what to expect, but I will say that it is a deep draft. Where it will stand compared to other drafts, that is to be determined later on.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's fair, Peter, what you said, that it's almost certainly the most deep draft since 2015. If it's better or not will be interesting. I mean, I feel pretty confident if you look at the top 4 or 5 guys in this year's draft that you'll get 4 elite NHL players, probably, maybe 5, you never know. But even when you look at the top 10, I'm less sure of that. I'm less sure of the talent there and extending out. I don't know that, like you look at that 2015 draft and some of the best players were selected in the 20s, and not just like 1 or 2, like 4 or 5 of them. And Sebastian Aho went in the second round. I don't know. Obviously, Kirill Kaprizov, some really solid goalies there. Obviously, like we've kind of mentioned, like, this is all projection and it's all about the future. Only time will tell if any of this comes true, really. But I don't know. I don't know that there'll be that talent later on. There might be, but I feel like it'll level off and be an average year relatively quickly. The top end is better than most years, maybe better than 2015, depending on how good Bedard, Fantilli, Michkov, Carlson turn out, because that might be better than who'd you have 2015. You had McDavid, Eichel, Strome, and who was fourth?
Marner, Hannafin.
Like top 5 might be better this year.
I can definitely with Fantilli and Bedard, because I think Fantilli's going to end up being a way better player than Eichel, even though Eichel's really good.
He's definitely got that potential. Has a similar draft year actually to Eichel, which is kind of a fun comparison with just almost 2 points per game in the NCAA. Yeah, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. I've just been getting this gnawing feeling that I've overhyped myself, and I'm setting myself up to think this is like NHL like foundation shaking draft, but it might just be like kind of average, 3 or 4 more great players than usual, but that's not a lot. Who knows? It could be a lot more than that. Could always be though. You never know.
It's gonna be interesting to look back on, that's for sure. Yeah. Even a couple seasons down the road to see how they've all kind of started to develop, right? So
yeah, and it feels like we've got a better amount than the last few years of prospects that have a real shot at playing in the NHL next year, which is a fun thing to have. Like there haven't been a ton of those the last few years.
Yeah,
but it feels like good chunk of them have a shot there. Well, thanks for playing along, guys, and humoring me. Now we'll move on to the way we love to wrap up our show every week, which is talking about our prospects of the week. Someone who's just been playing especially well lately that we want to highlight and bring your attention to. So, Peter, who's your prospect of the week this week?
Yeah, I've talked about University of Minnesota, the top line, 2 out of the 3. So why not complete the hat trick where I've talked about Matthew Nyes, Jimmy Snuggerud. I am going to talk about Logan Cooley right now. Obviously, coming in this season, we knew that University of Minnesota was going to be a great team. And obviously, they had 2 great rookies in Snuggerud and Cooley. And Cooley was just absolutely dominant this season. We saw it at the World Juniors last year, U18s. This year alone, he was very dominant as well. So he continued that with both his excellent playmaking, overall skill set, competitive nature, everything like that was on display. And he led the team in scoring with 48 points in 33 games, I believe. If my computer will load. Yeah, 48 and 33 to lead the team. That is impressive results right there for a rookie. And, you know, to be on that dominant top line, it just makes University of Minnesota that much more lethal and possibly the team to beat heading into the playoff tournament, right? Or the playoff round right now. So obviously they're going to go on a championship run, and Cooley's definitely going to play an important part right now. But for him to lead the team in scoring as a freshman is very, very impressive. Just very consistent throughout the whole entire season. And Arizona Coyotes have to be very proud of his overall two-way playmaking, gritty, competitive game, because he's got a lot of potential right now to be their top centerman.
Yeah, he's been incredible this year. Matt, you've talked in the past about or we've joked about like Team Matt, all these prospects named Matthew and Matt and stuff that are part of it. But Team Logan's coming for you. Yeah. Logan Cooley, Logan Stankoven. There's some great players coming out. 100%. But Cooley, obviously, he's got those 2 excellent wingers that have been just phenomenal this year. But he's probably one of my top 2 drafted prospects right now. And just a hint is that I don't think he's number 2. He has been incredible, and he's just been rising and rising for me. I was shocked to see him go before Shane Wright go 3rd overall last year, but it has made all the more sense every week, every day, every game he plays, basically. And he's just been rising and rising for me. Matt, who is your prospect of the week this week?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with a new Canucks prospect, former Buffalo Sabres prospect Josh Bloom, who was acquired very under the radar trade. They got this guy for Riley Stillman. Out of like, Canucks fans don't like Riley Stillman, so they're probably really happy that he was traded. But to get a guy like Josh Bloom for him, I was anticipating maybe a 7th round pick or a 6th round pick to get, and the Canucks actually traded a 2nd rounder to get Stillman. So to get a former 3rd rounder is pretty good. And as much as what Josh Bloom has looked so far, and he's drafted in 2021, 95th overall, I'm going to do more of a deep dive into his game in a future article, just if everyone stay tuned for that. But he's had a heck of a season. He's got 20. Well, okay, I've added up now. He's got 28 goals. Between the Saginaw Spirit and the North Bay Battalion, who's traded earlier in the season, but he's on pace for 70 points, so point per game. Yeah, and former captain of the Saginaw Spirit as well, and a lot of potential, a lot of actual looking into it. A lot of Buffalo fans actually were sad to see him get traded in this deal. So I mean, Bloom has become I don't know. I think he could, as much as the prospect pool the Canucks are, I think he's a top 5 prospect in the Canucks pool now.
Probably.
And he's got a lot of potential. Like I said, I'm going to look more into his game of what he can bring. But from what from what I've gathered so far, a very good, good size, 6'2", has got a goal scoring touch. Had another goal a couple goals a couple days ago from when we're recording here. Yeah, I'd keep an eye on him because the Canucks don't have a lot of exciting prospects. He's now one of them, and they didn't draft him and got him for a defenseman that was probably not part of their future. So great little trade that the Canucks made for the future, because I think Bloom could potentially be a really good NHL player.
Yeah, I think that was a really solid trade. It kind of, to me, whenever I watched them play, it felt like Stillman was weighing the Canucks down more than he was helping them. So to get a legitimate asset out of it is huge. And I like Bloom a lot too. I think he's a really good, at least in junior so far, he's a really good penalty killer. And he's got a real nose for the net. You mentioned his finishing touch. I guarantee, I don't know if this is true, I guarantee you look up like some compilation of his goals in the last year or two, and at least half of them, he's going to be like within 10 feet of the net. He's always just charging the middle, and he gets some tips. He gets in the dirty areas. I like him a lot. I think that's a good pick. Yeah, I mean, kind of.
Kuzmenko does most of his goals are right there.
Yeah, he is. I think he leads the league in deflection goals. Kuzmenko right now.
One of them, if he doesn't.
So wouldn't be a bad person for Bloom to learn from. Maybe, who knows? Yeah. Very, very different players though. But anyway,
yeah, for sure.
My prospect of the week is Sebastian Cossa, who has kind of been, fans are up and down on him a lot, Detroit fans. Obviously, you watch like Yaroslav Askarov, Jesper Wallstedt succeed in the AHL, and it's tough to not be a little disappointed maybe. But Cossa has really been sorting out the ECHL lately. He had a bit of a slow start. It's a league that's notorious for being horrible on goaltenders. Watch like highlight goals from the ECHL, and you'll see some of the worst defensive structure you've seen in your entire life. It looks like guys are just playing beer league out there. So goalies are in tough in that league. But in his last 5 starts, Cossa has a .979 save percentage, 141 shots against, and only 3 goals against. A couple shutouts in there. And the Toledo Walleye I think they've won 12 or 13 straight. So they're a wagon right now, and Kossa's looked really good, and hopefully he can carry that into the AHL next year, maybe the year after that as well. But he's progressing well. I think he's looked really solid there. So that's my pick. And all right, that about does it for us this week. Thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Prospect Corner. Make sure you subscribe to the Hockey Writers YouTube channel to make sure you don't miss any more of our episodes. And make sure you check out our site, thehockeywriters.com, for tons of 2023 NHL draft coverage as soon as today or last week, even depending on when you see this video. We've really been kicking off the draft coverage there, so take a look, and there's going to be lots more to come for the next few months. Make sure you also check out Hockeypedia on thehockeywriters.com. And thank you, Peter. Thank you, Matt. And thank you all for watching this week's episode of Prospect Corner. We'll see y'all next time.